And good morning and welcome back. Here's what we're focusing on this half hour.
Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, the current political climate has a lot of us just stressed out. A local psychiatrist here to break down how we can deal with those feelings in a, here's the key, productive way.
That's the key word.
Yes.
We've also been talking about Antarctica hitting a record high temperature. Remember this from earlier in the week, but we just learned there's a lot more to this story than we thought. We'll explain.
Also, we're streaming the show behind the scenes live on Facebook as we do every Friday morning at 9:30. Tyler is here. What's the question we're asking folks to help us with this morning?
Should we keep or should we eliminate daylight saving time? Give us your responses. We'll read some of them coming up later in the show.
I bet you have an opinion about that.
Debate. But first, President Donald Trump's approval ratings nationwide continue hovering around 40% or so, a historic low for a president just a few weeks into his first term.
So we dug into those numbers, and it actually turns out that of those approving of the president, 84% of Republican voters and voters who lean Republican are in favor of the job the president is doing. They say he's doing a really good job. That's more support from conservatives than George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush, even Ronald Reagan had from conservatives at this point in their presidencies. We take a look at Washington state. Fewer people here actually cast their votes for Donald Trump than they did for Mitt Romney, but local conservative leaders are quietly saying that support even here in the ranks of Republicans and conservatives growing with each move the president makes.
I think for most of the Republicans who didn't vote for Trump, he's been a happy surprise. And for those of us who I didn't initially support him in the primaries, I had a couple of other candidates I liked, but for those of us who supported him, we think he's got the country on the right track, but man, he's making it a wild ride, you know?
That was John Carlson. He's been a conservative voice in media in our area here for more than 3 decades. And we wanted to talk to him because as the host of a daily conservative talk show on KVI Radio, he's uniquely in touch with local conservatives and often really has the pulse of that movement in a traditionally blue state.
Yeah, he acknowledged very bluntly that it is tougher than ever for many people to hear and to listen when it comes to this, especially with people who have differing opinions, really getting through to each other. But he also said he believes the only way to do that and actually move forward is we stop taking our political differences as personal attacks.
People just are landing on a different spot from you. It doesn't mean they don't care about the things you care about. Maybe they just, have a different approach.
We pressed Carlson on possible White House connections to Russia, on the debate over refugees and immigration, on the team the president is building around himself. I've known John for years, and some of his answers surprised even me in this conversation. For those who support the president policies, our goal for this interview is to help you better understand your own opinions on these issues. For those who do not support the president's policies, we want to be very clear. We hope this interview helps you better understand why some of your neighbors hold differing views. This full interview, I promise it's an interesting one. We'll air it later in the show.
If you feel like all of this talk about politics is stressing you out, you are not alone. According to a new study by the American Psychological Association, 57% of us say we are stressed out by the current political climate. This includes 47% of Republicans and 72% of Democrats. And 66% of people say that the future of our country is a huge source of this particular kind of stress.
It's one thing to say we're stressed, but what can we do about it? I need a solution. Joining us this morning, psychiatrist Dr. James Hamill. Thank you for being here with us this morning. I think we all need a little bit of help to take a big breath.
Thank you for having me here, Travis and Casey. It's great to be here with you.
So the study actually showed that mental health professionals in general saw a bit of an uptick in patients that they were seeing struggling with anxiety right around the 2016 election. What did you see? Did you see that as well?
There's no question that in my practice and speaking with colleagues around the country, we're all seeing many more patients that have anxiety and that are really struggling with what to do with what's going on politically, and that this is going across the political spectrum. One of the important findings in the study is that it isn't limited to one political party or to anyone who voted for one candidate. 66% of the respondents said that they're worried about the future of the country. Even looking just at Republican respondents, asking them, how do you feel about what's going on? Fully half of them said that they were very anxious about the future of our country. So that's very important data for us.
people can't just ignore. I mean, this is the future of our country. I mean, I would think you'd normally want to push people away from a stressor, but what are you telling the folks who are coming to you and asking for advice and working with you?
So one of the most important parts is for people to recognize that the anxiety that they're feeling is normal. So we want to validate what they're feeling and make sure that they feel that they're actually being heard. The biggest problem that people are saying to me in my private practice is that they feel lost, that they don't feel that their family members, their colleagues, their friends are listening to them. And those are very valid concerns. I mean, that is really one of the most terrifying experiences for a human to have, to not feel understood or listened to. So regardless of where someone is politically, we want them to be able to feel that they're actually heard.
You're hitting on one of the big stressors that we're seeing firsthand just by monitoring the Q13 social media accounts and our own social media accounts. There's a lot of stress surrounding. I think people seem to feel flustered that they can't get their opinion out, and when they do, they're worried about being attacked. And that's on both sides. We're seeing that no matter what, all across all party lines. And it's affecting their relationships, not just with casual friends on social media, but as you mentioned, with family members, with their spouse and partners. So what are your recommendations for handling those relationships?
The fascinating thing is that it's the dirty E word, which is empathy. And one of the most important things is people being able to actually listen to what other people are saying and accept that. And hear it. And that's actually very difficult. We've become a society, unfortunately, where people have a very difficult time hearing anybody whose opinion doesn't match their own. This came up not only after the election, but during. And even the studies that were done looking at anxiety in our country before the election results, there was already an uptick in anxiety. So in terms of how to deal with it, one of the most important ways is people being able to have empathy for those whose views are not their own.
So someone who may be feeling this anxiety, trying to be more open to being listened to and to owning this, but for somebody who maybe isn't feeling anxious, the advice would be maybe try to listen and hear other people, because you don't know who is feeling this anxiety.
The anxiety is real. I mean, if somebody's telling somebody else that they're feeling anxious, that they're upset with certain things, if somebody wants to maintain a relationship with that person, they need to be able to hear that anxiety, and they need to be able to understand that that anxiety that that person is feeling is valid and real. They're not making it up. So it's very important to be able to hear that and listen to it. And part of what we do in therapy is address that and help people work on their empathy, feel that they are being listened to, and that empathy is going their way.
And very quickly, we're almost out of time, but we have a guest that we're going to be hearing from in just a few minutes who says politics shouldn't be personal. Don't take it personally. In your practice, how do you see that? Are politics personal? Because I know some people would argue that it is.
I mean, I would say that again, it goes back to the empathy. If somebody feels that they are being personally affected by politics, then by definition, those politics are personal. I think it's very important for people as part of the empathic process to be able to hear that and to be able to feel that they're not being ignored or neglected. So if they're raising a concern, that is valid.
Thank you so much. I think this is such a great conversation. Dr. James Hamill, thank you for being here, sharing all of this with us. We may have you back because I don't think the stress just goes away immediately.
I'd be happy to be back.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
And for more information, you can head to seattlepsych.com.
So we are talking about daylight saving time at this moment as well. It is just 9 days away, and now is the time, I'm sorry to tell you, to start changing your sleep schedule. You got to do it starting now. So we're going to be setting our clocks ahead. That means you're going to lose an hour of sleep. The day after daylight saving time is pretty dangerous. In fact, according to researchers, deadly crashes spiked by 17% the Monday after this change. So what can you do? Experts say starting tonight, you should try to have dinner an hour earlier. Maybe text your husband, text your wife, say we got to move things up. Go to sleep an hour earlier. Continue that routine for the whole week. I know that it sounds annoying. I know it does. But if you can do it starting tonight for those next 9 days, you're going to thank us on that Monday morning when it's so difficult for others to get up.
Travis, I hear that and I think, but during the weekend too?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
I'm sorry. Now, there is a little bit more to this story because Washington, one of 11 states working to get rid of daylight saving time. So we're over on Facebook right now asking folks about whether they like that idea or not. That's part of the debate too, is if we don't like it so much, maybe we shouldn't have it at all.
I mean, Travis, I have a friend that I used to work with who, if you even brought up daylight savings time, he would go into a rage.
Yeah.
It's terrible. It's ridiculous. So I know everybody on both sides, strong opinions.
And Arizona doesn't do it, so I don't know.
That's
We
true.
should look to them and see, do they like what they're doing without daylight saving time?
I like the desert weather that they have.
Me too.
No matter what. Travis, thanks. Now, earlier this week, we brought you this story that everyone talking. Antarctica hit a record high of 63.5 degrees Fahrenheit. And a warming Antarctica means a melting of ice, a rising of sea levels. But in talking with our meteorologist, MJ McDermott, we discovered there's actually a lot more to this story.
We are seeing warming across the planet, and the most vulnerable places on the planet are the poles, the North and South Pole, and the equator. The equator, unfortunately, where most of the poorest people of the world live, is the people who are least likely to adapt to climate change, and they're going to see sea level rise. Countries like Bangladesh, all along the equator, is going to see more sea level rise than anybody else.
Perhaps even more surprising, it's not just rising waters to be concerned with. Did you know 90% of the world's drinking water comes from Antarctica? That was something MJ told us. We had no idea. And there's something more, something called the ice albedo effect.
So one of the major cooling bits on our planet would be the ice in Greenland and at the poles. And so sunlight comes in, it hits that ice and it melts and it reflects back out again, and we stay cooler. As the ice melts and goes into our oceans, we have less reflective surface on our planet to reflect the sun's rays back out again, and the oceans and the land absorb heat more easily. So it's this a continuous effect of the less ice we have, the less reflection we have, the more warming we have, therefore the less ice we have, the less reflection we have, the warmer we get, and it just keeps happening. And so we start to warm up even more as the ice melts.
We should mention, and Travis, this was something you brought to us that astonished me. The temperature we're talking about, the high, was recorded in 2015. It takes them 2 years to verify. That's why we're hearing about it now. MJ does say climatologists are cautious about saying this is a definitive pattern of some kind, but they're just going to be keeping a close watch.
And she also says, look, think of the poles as like the canary in our global system, and what happens there really what signals what could happen for the rest of us. So that's why we have to care about wearing shorts in Antarctica.
I do not. I don't think. No.
Seems like a bad idea to
very,
me.
very bad.
So coming up next, President Donald Trump dealing with a lot of blowback from possible connections to Russia. But what do local Donald Trump supporters think about all the drama surrounding the White House? Up next, an interview with a local radio talk show host, John Carlson, a big voice in the conservative community.
He had a lot of great things to say. So what do you think of daylight saving time? Should we get rid of it? Keep it? Tyler, you're live on Facebook right now. Lots of answers.
That's right. Lorinda says either the whole country should be on daylight saving or not. So keep the responses rolling in. We'll read more of them coming up.
Awesome.
We are now more than 40 days into the new Donald Trump presidential administration, and we know what opponents think because they've been very vocal. But let's take some time to explore how supporters are feeling about the president so far.
Yeah, that's right. John Carlson is with us now, very prominent thought leader in the conservative movement in Washington State, in the Pacific Northwest. You also host a morning radio show over on Conservative Talk Radio, KVI. Let's start with this week, if you could start there. Big speech before joint members of Congress, but a very, very different tone than I think the Donald Trump we saw on Inauguration Day and even on the campaign trail. Are you worried at all? Because supporters loved that candid, off the cuff, and this was very different. Are you worried that he might turn off supporters despite the press and maybe others praising him for this?
You know, Travis, there's an old slogan in politics that you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. Okay, when you're president of all the people. You're not trying to get to, 270 electoral votes. You're now responsible for an entire nation. So striking a presidential tone, being a unifier whenever possible, that is always a good sign. And the people really liked what they heard the other night. CBS and CNN, 75% plus liked the speech, even though he didn't change any of his positions, didn't dilute any of his positions. He just adopted the kind of tone that I think serves him really well.
We've talked a lot about the potential Russia connections, both during the campaign itself. We're still talking about it now.
Yeah.
We have a lot of things that keep coming out. The Attorney General was even swept into the allegations. How do his supporters feel about those allegations? Do they care? And is this something that they're watching very closely?
I think that Russia's been meddling in elections in this and other countries for years. It's part of what they do. And they clearly were, hacking into the Democratic National Committee, responsible for giving the emails to WikiLeaks. So I think Russia's role in the election should be investigated. Now, the early reports that they hacked the election itself, that they may have helped change vote totals, no evidence for that. But by the way, voting machines aren't hooked up to the internet. So I don't think there's any concern about Russia tilting the U.S. election, but were they still messing around in our election? Yes. And if they were, they should pay a price for that. And by the way, the people around Trump, his defense secretary, his new national security advisor, you got General Kelly there at Homeland Security. These are not guys who are fond of Russia. And so I think that we're going to get to the bottom of it. Congress will make sure. And the Democrats want to put heat on it. That's how democracy works. Let them.
You think so? In general, supporters are supportive of this process kind of playing out then when it comes to...
I am.
Yeah.
Really?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Look, anytime you have other countries misbehaving in any way in your country, it should be investigated, and it should be bipartisan. I think Jeff Sessions, as Attorney General, recusing himself, which I expect he's going to say he's going to do, is a good sign, because you want these investigations to be by the book and not influenced by politics. Yeah.
Let's change topics and talk about immigration. So the rollout of the original, what's called a travel ban, you can use whatever language you want to around it, and then the court fight that sort of has been playing out, Washington State kind of being one of the key members of that. How do you think the conversation about immigration surrounding the Trump administration's moves have been playing with his supporters and with perhaps those Republicans who've now come across and begun to support him, as you mentioned earlier?
Yes, refugee policy and immigration policy.
Two different things, but I think if you talk about immigration in general and border conversation.
Right. My take on refugees is that if people are trying to escape the bombs and the bullets, which is clearly what's going on in Syria and in Iraq and other countries as well, the U.S. should be trying to set aside safe areas in Iraq and Syria with other countries, and making sure these people can stay close to their cultures, their history, their language, their traditions. If people want to come to America and be American, that's a different process. Do I have a problem with a short time out so we can vet our procedures? I don't have a problem with that, but the rollout of the executive orders was clunky and was misfired, and so I think they're going to rewrite these executive orders, and probably in the next couple of days.
How do people feel about the people he's surrounding himself with? A lot has been made about how much he values his daughter's input, his son-in-law's input. How do people feel about that?
I like the people around him. I love our national security team that I just mentioned, a minute ago. I really like the purposeful people that he is bringing into government. These are people who are going to make a difference. The new Commerce Secretary, took a huge pay cut to take the job. You want people who sacrifice to take these jobs, if possible. So there are people who are on board with his agenda. I think his Health and Human Services Secretary, as an example, former Congressman Tom Price is a doctor. One of the few doctors in Congress, became a specialist in healthcare policy. The perfect guy. If you are going to not just repeal but replace the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare, do it with people who know how medicine works. So, I like most of the people he's got with him.
As a just sort of style question, and maybe we only have a couple of seconds left here, but opponents have said that, it kind of tried to paint the White House as kind of a mess. That, the travel ban didn't roll out the way it should have, and we've already had the Flynn resignation, and sort of painted this picture. Does that play at all among supporters? I mean, what is the perception when you hear those kind of pictures painted?
I think, the first few months of any new administration, there's bound to be some chaos. There's bound to be some bedlam. People just finding their way. Some of the early appointees may not be a comfortable fit. So, I'm not that surprised so far. I'll tell you who needs to get on the ball is Congress. At this point in the Obama administration, they had already passed the stimulus because Congress had already passed the stimulus bill. It's Congress that needs to get on the ball and get a lot of this stuff passed.
Fantastic, John Carlson.
I wish we could talk to you for another hour. There's so much to unpack here.
I'll come back.
Please
Thank
do.
you. Yes.
We would love that.
If you
really
don't
would.
get too much hate mail, I'll come back.
We get hate mail either way.
Yep.
Either way.
Every
from
day.
all sides. So
We can listen to you 6 to 10, KVI Radio, Monday through Friday.
Monday through Friday.
And we do.
Thank you, Travis.
Thank you, John.
thank you so much.
Yes, you bet, Casey.
And we do thank John for being on the show. Now, he did make one reference here about the Attorney General recusing himself. We wanted to make sure that folks know that we taped this yesterday. So that's why that reference
He was right, though.
He was
in
indeed.
his prediction.
That's right.
Take a look now at your screen. This is your Friday trivia. Ooh, and it is Sounders related. Hop on over to Facebook Live and help us out with what the answer is, because Travis and I don't know. No cheating.
No cheating. All right, take a look at your screen. Here's the Friday trivia. Which Sounders player was named MVP in the MLS Cup? Casey, what's your guess?
I guess Stephen Fry.
I guessed Jordan Morris, but I think I'm wrong. But I'm a fan of all of them. But Jordan, I have a special place in my heart.
And the
for.
reason we think we're wrong is that one of our members of our crew, Corey, shouted out the answer very confidently.
Very
We went,
confidently.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
And the answer is Stephen Fry!
Well done,
Yay!
Corey.
Corey,
Well
you
done.
win.
Well done.
You win.
Thank you, everybody, on Facebook for playing along. And, of course, the Sounders playing Houston tomorrow. You can catch that match right here, Q13 Fox, 5:30.
And if you missed our Sounders special, Return of the Champions last night, guess what? Take a look at your screen. You can catch it again Sunday night, 5 o'clock right here on Q13 Fox. We have head coach Brian Schmetzer mic'd up, and we sat down with Stephen Fry and some of the new guys. So you'll want to meet them. Just set your DVRs for that.
So we've been asking about daylight saving time. Tyler is here. You've been running Facebook Live. What have folks been saying? Do you think the majority of people are in support of keeping it or getting rid of it?
I say it's about 2 to 1. 2 to 1 say let's get rid of daylight saving, just be standard across the country with everyone. So here's some of the responses. Susan, those who work all day get a chance to get outside while it's still light. It's great.
Yeah.
Louise, on the other side, get rid of it. Trish says lots of people work in the morning and it's nice to have that extra daylight.
That's how I feel. The morning,
Yeah.
being on the
We're a
morning
little-
team, I'm kind of biased.
We're a little selfish about
but
that.
I am very the dark at 4 o'clock in January.
Yeah,
is
it's brutal.
Tough.
It's brutal.
That's just tough. Yeah.
Can't tell what time it is. And then let me say, let's
Yes.
say you work shift work. I know a lot of nurses and
Yeah.
doctors, and we do. Try going to bed in
Exactly.
July at 7 or 8
Right.
o'clock at night.
That is Michael's point on here. Make it go away. The spring forward shift increases accidents and
Yes.
interferes with sleep cycles. And actually, this comes up almost every year in the state legislature. There's a bill this year, like there is pretty much every year, saying, should we keep it? Should we get rid of it? But it never seems to quite go through.
And it was all about farmers back
Right.
in the day. And not that farmers aren't important, because they're very important, but I think the reasoning behind it back in the day has
Yeah.
kind of changed. Our world is a 24-hour world now.
And when this was proposed in the legislature this year, they actually made that point and said, it's not really for farmers. You still get the same amount of
Yeah.
daylight. It's an hour
it's just a
shifted.
different amount of
So it
time.
really doesn't bring you any more
Got it.
daylight. So there you go.
As always, Tyler, thank you for
Thank you,
being
Tyler.
here. Thank you
Thank
for
you, guys.
running the Facebook live stream and bringing us the viewer
course.
comments. So you'll be back next Friday, 9:30, as will we.
Yes. Every Friday, 9:30. And of course, be sure to tune in tomorrow morning on Joe TV from 6 to 10 a.m. We'll see you then. Ta-ta.